the entire entry plan. It's available on our website in our board docs section under the superintendent's report from the last meeting. I encourage you to go there. There'll be detail that inevitably will lead you to additional questions. But I just want to hit the highlights. These are our top 6 priorities over the next 90 days. First is relationship building. One of the most compelling reasons to take on this job for me was I believe in this community, and not just the great residents, but all the folks who come to the table to support families and kids across the now 23 municipalities that make up our school district. We have stakeholders from the university to the political domain. We have homeowners and business owners. We've got parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, and a number of people who really want to see a stronger and better Normandy. And so we're going to invest time in ensuring that we hear from you. This is an opportunity to make some of those initial contacts, but we'll also do some one-on-ones and face-to-face, some small groups with kids, parents, and other stakeholders to make sure that people's voices are heard as we start to think about the next iteration of our district. Secondly, I'm really grateful that before I even joined, this board was already immersed in a strategic plan to contemplate the next 5 years of development within Normandy. Everywhere I go in leadership, I always start with a strategic plan. Where are we going? How fast do we need to go there? And how will we know we've been successful? This board has engaged a nationally known education group called the Tune Education Partners to do that strategic planning work. And through a community of stakeholders from the community, parents and staff, they have been working on crystallizing a new set of values, crystallizing a new set of priorities, and talking about, it's probably the most important, talking about a new vision for what a graduate looks like in Normandy. We all have a framework that might be somewhat dated because it's predicated upon a 20th century industrialized economy that no longer exists. Normandy, I think, is one of the first districts to step out and say, we'll be a 21st century learning community that really prepares kids for not just college, but careers that we don't even quite understand yet. And so in the next 90 days, we'll finalize that strategic plan and get to executing on it this fall. Our third priority is around instruction. We heard a couple things. One was that we did not have rigorous aligned curriculum in all of our areas. And to the extent that we had curriculum, we weren't implementing on that with fidelity and consistency. As a consequence, then, we will be implementing new curriculum this fall, especially in early literacy. If kids can't read, they can't access any of the content. We'll be piloting some rigorous content in mathematics. And as I mentioned to you, we will be rethinking our picture of what a graduate is from Normandy High School, which ultimately will lead us to a conversation around what our graduation requirements look like. Additionally, we'll be working on what great teaching looks like. What's our picture for instructional excellence? How do we train that for our teachers? And then based on the feedback we've gotten from our teachers, how do we support it? How do we make sure that they have the observation and feedback information that they need to improve their practice? And so our third priority really is to look at instruction and to make sure that we're growing as far as that's concerned. I've already started work on trying to get flexibility from the state so we can maximize adult learning time. If we don't make the adults great, we can't make the kids great. And so we'll be spending time on that. Fourth, a strong start. Re-entry is something everybody's talking about, from daycare centers all the way up through colleges and universities. What does it mean to bring people back into the space? And so part of that for us is technology. Do we have the right infrastructure such that if we see a resurgence of this virus, we're able to stop school on a Wednesday and Thursday morning be back up virtually and continuing the learning of our students. That's not just about devices and Wi-Fi hotspots. That's also about making sure the teachers are appropriately trained to be able to deliver instructions via Google Classroom, via Zoom, or any of these other platforms like Microsoft Teams. And so we're back to adult learning and instruction. A strong start means that we've prepared people in case we have to have some remote learning happening in the fall. It also means that we need to set new paradigms around school culture. The survey data says that 40% of our kids feel like our classrooms and our corridors are disruptive. You can't learn in an environment where you feel like you are put upon either physically or psychically. We need to come with a better paradigm for our kids as far as that's concerned. And we need to make sure that our teachers are ready to deliver the best pedagogy, the best teaching strategies as it pertains to classroom management and student engagement. So our fourth priority is strong start, and we'll make sure upon re-entry we're a different Normandy coming back. Our fifth priority is around school culture, and I've touched on that a little bit. But when we set a new outcome in terms of our graduate aims, we have to set, I think, the kind of expectations around what that means behaviorally. We're not just talking about who's targeted school, who's not targeted school. We're not talking about who's mildly disruptive in classroom and who's focused and paying attention. We're also talking about how we teach our kids to work. What kind of productivity do you have to have if you're preparing for a four-year college or university? What does that mean about homework? What does that mean about summer school? What does that mean about additional classes to support your learning? So setting a school culture that is predicated upon that graduate outcome will be incredibly important. And finally, how do we align resources to that strategic plan? We got to put our money where our mouth is. And so if we don't have strong literacy, we're going to come in with new content. A, how do we purchase that content? And then B, how do we support it? How do we make sure that our teachers and our leaders have from either the developer of the content or some other source, the kind of supports they need to do it with fidelity such that we get the outcomes that we want from our kids. We're talking about new graduate aims for our students. We've got a great conversation teed up tomorrow with a potential partner about a stronger, more rigorous high school. But if we truly believe in a stronger, more rigorous high school, then we need to look like that. And we've got years of deferred maintenance on the high school campus that will need to be remedied and cured, not just from the standpoint of representing the rigor that we want to put in front of our kids, but from a safety and security standpoint. Too many points of penetration, not enough staff based on those points of penetration. We need to fix that. Health and safety issues. What does it mean if we need to do social distancing within that space? We might be able to send a third grader home for a couple of months and continue their learning. That's much harder to do when you're talking about a student in an honors chemistry class or a student in algebra 2. And so what does it mean to create the spaces in our buildings where we can keep people safe, we can keep the spread of disease down, but we can keep learning happen for our most fragile learners, those kids that we're about to hand a diploma to and send out into the world as adults. And so very much concerned about making sure that we align our resources, that they hook up with our priorities. So those are the 6 things that we as a school community have to be hyper-focused on. And we get those 6 things accomplished. We still have 100 things to do. But those are the things that I think are most crucial, most essential for getting ramped up for re-entry in the fall. I say re-entry, and I know that that causes questions as people are thinking about, what does that look like? Are you talking half days? Are you talking AV days where half the kids come on Monday and half the kids come on Tuesday? Are you going to socially distance on the buses? Are you going to shut down Natural Bridge? What does that mean for our kids? And the answer to that, frankly, is I don't know. And none of us do. We had a conversation among superintendents in the region, and every community has a subset of particular issues that will feed that decision. I don't think we'll come up with a conclusion that is a St. Louis or St. Louis County type of conclusion. We'll have a process that's crafted for Normandy specifically, and we'll continue to work on that and keep you posted as we do that. But know that our intention is to bring our kids back. That as much as there is a pressure to lean in on remote learning, virtual spaces, and what that means in the 21st century or in the wake of a pandemic, our kids are affected negatively by the lack of human contact. And cognitive development requires personalized touch. And if we're going to be serious about it, those of us who've been able to do okay in life, remember that coach, we remember that choir instructor, we remember that fourth grade teacher, we remember that principal, that counselor, we remember all of those people who fed into our growth and development. It wasn't just about how we got information disseminated to us. It was about the rich tapestry of human relationships. And so our goal will be for the fall at this juncture to return our kids to a place where they can be nurtured and cared for. Now, there are a whole host of reasons why that might not happen. Sam Page shuts down St. Louis County and we're back at home. I mean, there are things that are beyond our control. But if we can get it done, we really want to make sure that our kids are back with us and that we're serving them 100%. So those are the priorities I'd like to set before you. Again, I invite you to go and read the entire entry plan if you have an interest, and certainly want your feedback desperately as you read some of those things. Bear in mind, it is incomplete. That's just the next 90 days. It's not the next 5 years. That's a different conversation in a different town hall that'll be happening in a couple of months after our board votes on the strategic plan. But preliminarily, this is the way we want to enter the space. So at this juncture, I'm gonna turn it back over to Sharifa. She's gonna ask you to take whatever questions you have and put them in the chat. And then she'll share those questions. I will respond and try to be succinct. I will tell you up front, that's hard for me. But we'll get to as many as we can and then commit to answering those that we cannot at a different time. Sharifa?
Okay. We don't have any questions in the chat yet, but some of the attendees submitted questions in advance, so we can start there. Let me see, you've addressed the reentry plan, so I won't go back over that question. An interesting question that was submitted, please tell us your thoughts or what you know about the worth or efficacy of the Jennings, Dr. Tiffany Anderson, former superintendent at Jennings, implemented the data walls or data boards she formally credited as most important to her directed turnaround in leading Jennings to its dramatically improved academic achievement scores.
Yeah, and so, I'm not directly connected to the work. At the time, I was working out of state. I'm fond of Jennings because Jennings gave me my first teaching job at Jennings Junior High. Teaching 8th graders, which was a unique experience. If you've never had to live with an 8th grader, I try 120 of them on a daily basis. And so I've always followed the growth and development of the Jennings School District as a consequence. And I've appreciated a number of the initiatives that Dr. Anderson put into place during her tenure. Probably the most significant, I agree with data walls, or at least data analysis, and certainly Normandy will be engaging in a different kind of assessment program that leads us to a different kind of data platform, and we'll make decisions based on that data. But to me, the most significant part of that work was Dr. Anderson was aspirational about Jennings. She came to those babies and she said, a high school diploma is just not enough. That you need to want more, we want more for you. And so the kind of changes she made to the rigor were fascinating to me because I thought those changes brought hope and possibility. The fact that she engaged in external supports, even to the point of establishing a group home kind of setting for homeless students, made sense to me. We need to meet our babies where they are. We need to meet our families at the point of support that they actually need. And so I think there are great lessons to be learned from her tenure there. And I think Normandy is a great place to implement those lessons. To know that there's a network of youth serving organizations that are providing healthcare, um, access to food, housing, within the footprint of the 23 municipalities in Normandy says to me, we already have a community that cares and is prepared to provide a safety net for our families. Now we need to meet that investment, which is at this point topping $4 million a year annually in private money, with those ambitious expectations for who our babies can be and become. And so I think we'll see elements of some of that Jennings transformation under Dr. Anderson in Normandy in very short order.
Okay, thank you. The next question, how can the mayors of the 24-1 help with your vision?
I think the mayors are going to be absolutely crucial because um, we are stretched across interesting topography in our school district where a number of our neighborhoods are disconnected. And the mayors help us, I think, to, as we build a new and better brand for Normandy, be able to carry that throughout those communities. At some point, not today, not tomorrow, there'll be an ask of this community to join hands and wrap our arms around these babies, whether that is the transformation of the high school campus, which has been long neglected, or say our elemental babies out at Belle Noor who are in a space that is um, definitely inhabitable, but not at the standard that says that we are prepared to run 12 months for you to make sure that you have everything you need to be successful. The mayors will be a big part of the conversation then about how we talk to this community about a new vision for Normandy and why this community, even to the extent that they may no longer have kids in the system, even to the extent that they don't have an everyday interaction with the school buildings, still needs to be part of the movement, still needs to be part of the support, still needs to stand with these kids. And so I'm anxious to join them for those conversations because I'm not convinced that we can get it done without them.
Okay, our next question. How are you prepared to support parents with being comfortable with the district again? Does Normandy have a parent advocacy team, or will you implement one or work with any parent groups?
Yeah. So I think it's twofold. One, I see two sets of parents that we're talking about. One group of parents need our help and support um, to access the kind of quality of life that we want them to have and for their kids to enjoy within our school spaces and in our neighborhoods. The second group of parents have long lived in our community but opt out of our system. And so how do we persuade those parents that we are a great choice right there in their neighborhood where we want them to be invested and nurtured. So let's deal with the first group of parents, which is ultimately, I live in this community. I want my child to be successful, but I need supports. We're going to hire a director of community partnerships and engagement to really coordinate the wraparound services that are already present. We've got great nonprofits that serve our community, and we've been less than strategic about how that gets coordinated. Frankly, we don't fund that work, and so like it's not necessarily then the district has had a problem in this regard because we're not paying for it, but it's a rich opportunity. I think we can capitalize on it. And the reason I feel like we need to capitalize on it is one place where we've really struggled is attendance. And so this person would be our chief attendance officer, who is not just coordinating at the building level, principals, counselors, nurses, teachers, our family engagement folks that we get from Beyond Housing, but they're also coordinating home visits to say, what's the barrier here to getting this baby to school, and how do we help um, overcome that barrier so that we can get our kids to school more than 90% of the time. So we're making an investment to ensure that we have better communication amongst those groups that serve our families, better utilization of those services, and that we're removing all the barriers to folks being successful. That's first. The second is a whole question of how does Normandy appeal to folks who may have lost confidence in us? And I think the only way to get that at that is to be ambitious, to suggest that we want as much or more. Wait a minute, I'm on mute. Was I talking and nobody heard me? You heard me okay? Okay, so I don't.
I can hear you.
It was just a second you were on mute.
Okay. Woo. I said a lot, so I was nervous. Okay, and so in terms of how we think about that group of parents, I think we have to put a world-class academic program on the table. Normandy has to equal hope and possibility. And the truth that we have to tell about that is hope and possibility is not today what it was 10 years ago, what it was 20 years ago. Hope and possibility is training our kids for a reality that none of us understand. Whether it is automation or artificial intelligence, the world of work has changed forever. And so as our children enter the market, they've got to be nimble, they've got to be flexible, they have to be able to change on a dime, because who knows what their skill set will need to be. And so we used to, as a society, take great pride in, my granddad built this whole block and he had a third grade education, but he had the sweat of his hands. And those realities don't exist anymore. When we start talking about technical education, we used to have an auto body shop at my high school. You learned to fix a car. That was a tangible skill. And now a car is a big computer that requires a bigger computer to do a diagnostic to determine what might be wrong with it. I've got a friend who used to represent a paint company in Evansville, Indiana. When he started in the 70s, you could go in that paint company with an 8th grade education and mix paint, and now you need a college degree in chemistry to be able to do that. The world of work is different. And if Normandy is going to attract those parents who've bought out, we have to be able to say Normandy equals opportunity, possibility, and in a way that is much more poignant and much closer to you and relevant to you than any other option you can enjoy in St. Louis or St. Louis County. And so we're not ready for that work today. I'm not ready to put a brochure together. I'm not ready to go knock doors. We've got things to fix first. But after we fix those things, know that the narrative will be not just why you should bring your child back to Normandy because you live in Bell Ridge or you live in Beverly Hills. The narrative should be, this is why people from across the county ought to be able to at least knock on our door and say, I love Jennings, but I really want my child in Normandy. I am really enjoying our time in Hazelwood, but I'd rather drive 15 minutes to get access to the phenomenal things happening at Normandy High School. And so I'm hoping down the road, we're not just a destination of choice for our district parents, but we're a destination of choice for parents even outside of our district.
Okay, next question is around special education. The question says, we see that SPED services are broken across districts. How are you prepared to support this class of students? How do we ensure that children receive needed testing and services?
Yeah. And so I think a twofold response. If we're getting this right, the support continuum, the academic support continuum for all of our students should rise. In 3 years, it should be very hard to write an IEP in Normandy because we provide so many supports for all of our kids. and not just for the kids who qualify for an IEP. That's first. We're not going to get from 15.4% ELA to 85% proficiency in ELA without tremendous supports for kids academically. And so we need to be better about support, period, even for our general education students. The second thing is we've got a great partner in special school district. It's a unique model where kids are dually served. Every morning when we jump on our administrative team meeting, SSD is on that administrative team meeting as well, talking about how to coordinate services across our buildings and how to incorporate learnings from other places that would inure to the benefit of our students. Having said all of that, all of our kids are priority, and their exceptionalities don't in any way disqualify them from the continuum of care that we intend to put on the table for all the kids. So we care about being excellent. We're not going to absolve our teacher of service that work for us of their responsibility to serve our SPED kids well, even when we have a teacher of record present from SSD simultaneously serving those kids.
Thank you. Next question. What role do you see after-school programs playing in the school year to come?
Yeah. After school is just weird for me because I think after school is sort of the luxury of people with money, which is to say that one of my former professors, Yvette Jackson, who was one of the co-founders of the National Urban Alliance in New York City, wrote a book called The Pedagogy of Confidence. And in that book, she talks about kids who are school dependent. And there are a number of kids in St. Louis County who are not dependent upon their school. If they don't learn it during the day, somebody's taking them to Sylvan or Kumon, they've got access to tutoring or something that will help them to get over the bar. Our kids are going to be dependent. If we send them out and they don't know how to do the algebra we taught, guess what? We have the responsibility of supporting that algebra. And so I'm much more interested in how we think about extended day to ensure that our kids have the supports. So not after school, but longer school. I'm much more interested in thinking about how we utilize summer in a different way, not as an add-on or an option, but as a continuation of the learning that our kids so desperately need. Because the fact of the matter is their more affluent peers are getting that because they're able to pay for academic camps. You know, I'm going to do basketball in the afternoon, but I spent my morning doing math in an academic camp. And if our kids are going to have access, then we're going to provide that. And so I would say I'm thinking about academically how we do support in an extended day and extended year kinds of programs. And then from a co-curricular standpoint, like if we get truly extracurricular, as we start winning on the academic front, I do think that we have a missed opportunity as it pertains to developing a continuum of athletic programs, especially in track and field, basketball, volleyball, football, and soccer, developing a continuum of performing arts programs in instrumental and vocal music. And so these are things I think once we care about them, we start nurturing them in elementary school. These are kids who should grow up feeling like, I want to be a Viking. I want to play basketball in Viking Hall. I want to score a touchdown at Viking Stadium. I want to sing in the musical in the Viking theater. And so under the circumstances, we have to be intentional about being holistic. How do we do leadership programs and STEM programs? And so building a web intentionally of co-curricular programs to support the academic program will be important.
Okay. We've got a question regarding student assessments. They want to know about the return to school student assessments and how it will inform instruction.
And so unfortunately, we don't have an internally designed assessment program. We've been doing some STAR assessments that we believe are mostly in line with the Missouri map and the Missouri state standards. And so we haven't quite reached a conclusion on what our baseline assessment will be. And ultimately, the bigger and broader question is, what do our summative assessments look like? How will we know, based on what we find in August, that we've actually managed to get growth from our kids by the time they leave us again in May? And so building out that summative assessment program is something that we'll commit to. We'll have to devote full-time staff to just the development of the tests, the evaluation of the tests, the circulation of the data from those tests. And so I heard a superintendent to say today in a way that I thought was very poignant that we have been hyper-focused on spring loss when we really should be focused on fall gain. And so whatever assessment program we come up with really is just about saying, if this is the new North Star for Normandy, how far is this child from this North Star? And how does that inform what we need to do to get this child to that place by the close of the school year? So when I think about assessment, it's not just, okay, let's find a test, let's let that test tell us their grade level equivalency, and then let's start making up stuff to fill in gaps. No, we need to say a seventh grader needs to be here by the end of seventh. We've given a test at the beginning of 7 to see how far you are from that mark. We will give 3 more tests over the course of school year to make sure you're advancing on those skills. But ultimately, we need to decide every spring whether or not you're making it to that level. So building out that assessment program is going to be critical for us, especially in the gateways. I hate it when I'm sitting in a conference with a family who has a child who's 2 or 3 grade levels behind, and they didn't know it because that child just kept getting promoted. Because they thought if you issued the promotion letter, even if my child struggled all year, she hit it. She must have hit it, because if she hadn't hit it, then you wouldn't have moved her forward. And when you sit them down and they're in the 7th grade and they're reading at the 4th grade level, the kind of emotional decimation that a parent feels. I failed. Why didn't I know this? And you have to tell them, you're not the professional. The folks who should have been interrupting this didn't, but we're going to fix it, right? And so getting to being able to have that clarity with our families will be tremendously important, especially in my mind at grades 3, grades 5, grade 8, as kids are starting making transitions. We shouldn't be pushing kids into places where they're just not ready, just to make ourselves feel better.
Next question. What school districts locally, regionally, and or nationally are you looking to help guide you as you look to lead and improve NSC?
So locally, I feel like we have county cousins. I'm very impressed with Dr. Sharonica Hardin-Bartley and the kind of innovation she's leaned into. She's reinventing one of her elementary schools. She's taken 2 of her most dynamic leaders and put them in a co-principalship, and she's unleashed them to do transformational work there. I love that as I'm talking to you about gateway assessments, Joe Davis is already on the pathway to that in Ferguson, Florissant. And we believe that we'll learn a tremendous amount from them. They are specifically focused on mathematics right now, but I think this is a modality that we could extend out to ELA, science, and social studies down the road. And so very interested in that collaboration. In terms of nationally, I'm thinking about the places where kids have grown the fastest, whether that has been Denver or Indianapolis or Chicago, these systems that have said ultimately we lean in on brokenness and consequently we're pulling out all the stops. We don't have time for 24 months of task force and work groups. We've got to make transformation happen and happen right now. And so I've laid on the table a number of initiatives that we ought to be thinking about and committed to. But frankly, guess what? I'm one guy, I've got so much bandwidth. We need to invite others to the table to talk to us about helping us with these problems. If we can't fight on all fronts, then just like as if we were at war, right? We didn't fight World War II alone. It was a group of allies. We need allies who will say, if you've got the Western Front, I can fight on the Eastern Front, and together we can win this thing. And so That's what I've learned from Indianapolis and Denver, right? They just didn't say, what is our internal capacity and how do we build it, which we are doing. They also said, how do we stretch beyond our borders to get our friends who believe in the same things we believe in to come and join us in this fight? And so those are the places where I'm trying to learn and bring in great practice for Normandy. You're on mute, Sharif.
Okay. The next question is regarding middle school students and electives. The question says that they didn't feel as if middle school students had a lot of choices with electives. Are there any plans to change that?
So we have a conversation and offing around our staffing in general for the elemental model. And I had not heard the concern around their elective choices. I had been kind of hyper-focused on whether or not they were getting enough minutes in ELA and mathematics. Definitely willing to take that under consideration. Some that's just going to be about scale. We have a couple hundred middle school kids in one building and less than 100 in another. And so, but I do think, to the earlier point, there might be ways to support it co-curricularly by providing opportunities outside of the school day for some of that. But that hasn't been on my radar screen, but I would definitely take that entire conversation around staffing for the elemental.
The next question is from one of our partners with St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley, Dr. Perkins. She's the provost there. Her question is around the dual credit program that we have with them. Normandy was the first district to have high school graduates earn an associate's degree at the same time as their high school diploma. And our district is still one of the only districts that is participating at this level. Do you intend to continue this trajectory, and what can St. Louis Community College do to help you reach your goals of students earning college credits while in high school?
Yeah. And so I did not know about that partnership. I'm gratified to hear about it. I got into this work, my first role in school leadership was around activating Indiana's first early college high school that required college courses for high school graduation. The middle college model that was happening on community college campuses like St. Louis Community College across the country gave birth to the early college movement. And so I feel very connected to that work in ways that are personal and professional. I guess my reflection to Dr. Perkins and to all of the great people over at Flow Valley is if we've been a good partner, we want to be a great one. And my interest is in talking about how we deepen those commitments such that we can reliably say to an 11-year-old, when you get to 11th grade, you're going to have access to these college classes. You're going to have the opportunity to attain this degree as you get your high school diploma. And so I have been at that work for the last 20 years and am really interested in what Normandy and Flow Valley have already been doing and talking about how we can do more.
One question, we have a question about a high school, at the high school. Do we have any intentions on having a journalism program there, a journalism program with a high school student newspaper, which will provide research and interviewing experience?
Yes, I mean, we have a whole host of programs at the high school that I'm just trying to get on top of. I just met our fashion merchandising teacher a couple of hours ago who knew we were doing that. And so as it pertains to journalism, I believe very deeply in student voice and have reflected to Dr. Suggs over the St. Louis American that I would love to see high school students not just writing stories and submitting them, but being responsible for some portion of the newspaper where they are not just generating stories, but editing those stories, getting them ready to be published. And so I don't know what we have happening with journalism, but I do think that for the community that we're building, there will be a lot of storytelling about what was and what is and what has become. And the best voices for those stories are kids. I, as I said to you, I think we have a resource alignment issue where we've got to do some work that'll be tough, and we need the mayors to support us as we go to the community and say we need more love and support from you at a time that's hard because we're in some challenging economic circumstances. Well, me saying that is one thing, but kids saying is an entirely different thing. And so the more we empower student voice, whether that's through the student newspaper or 5 or 6 other vehicles, I think the better off we're going to be about telling the story of Normandy.
Okay. Next question. How will you stabilize the teacher workforce to stop mid-year turnover?
I'm going to say something unpopular, then I'm going to say something pragmatic. So the unpopular thing is, I'm not sure that the teacher turnover is avoidable in this context. As much as I'd like to think it is, I'm just aware that there's a national teaching crisis. And I sat on a commission impaneled by the governor of Indiana with legislators, with the Higher Ed Commission, with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to talk about how we increase teacher pipelines, because even suburban districts were finding it hard to maintain teachers in a way that they hadn't. 30 years ago, if you opened up a science position in a school district like Rockwood, you got 30 applicants and you were able to get to 5 finalists. Well, now you go with that same position, you might get 5 applicants and 3 of those people may not even hold a teaching credential. We're in tough times all over, and teachers can move in a way that is eerily similar to nurses. That being said, we don't say die. And because we don't say die, then what I would say pragmatically is this: we need to be in a position where we can take mere mortals and make them look like tenured teachers. And so my pitch to the State Board of Education through DESE is to say, given our school district and our turnover, I need to be in a position to be on an ongoing basis training adults. I need 3 weeks before school opens. I need half a day every week to keep training these people to be great for our kids. If you give me that, then I'm not worried about turnover, because I'll keep training them. I'll keep priming the pump. I'll keep pushing folks in front of our kids who grow to higher and higher levels of competency. And so I've actually tried to keep teachers based on money. I've offered folks $10,000, $15,000 raises in a different context. And they've said to me, I really like you. I really love these kids. This is really hard work. Poverty is kind of overwhelming for me. And this other job is just easier. I don't know that we can cure that. Even when we get to high student outcomes, this is still going to be the toughest work to do in the city. Because while we can cure low reading scores, we won't necessarily have cured poverty. And those issues will continue to ripple onto our school buses and down our corridors and into our cafeterias. That being said, the best place that Normandy can be is the best training ground for teachers, young and experienced, in St. Louis County. And that's the continuum we intend to build.
Okay, next question. It's another question about parent involvement. Parents don't always know what to ask or how to express what a child may need. How do you plan to educate parents on the school's best practices, and how will advocacy training be incorporated in Normandy?
Say that one more time, Sharifa, because I don't want to miss that. That was a multi-layered thing. I need to get all of that.
Okay. Parents don't always know what to ask or how to express what a child may need. How do you plan to educate parents on the school's best practices, and how will advocacy training be incorporated in Normandy?
You know, one of the things that we're surprisingly good at is openness. We've got a parent support center that's right at the front of our campus services building. And We invite folks to come in with myriad concerns that we actually intend to respond to. Beyond though that access,
Nor
you have a broader question around, you've posed a broader question around parent training. And I'm not convinced that that is the right framework for the district. I think the right framework for the district is to say, here's our promise to you as people who are serving you, and you should hold us accountable to our promise. I promise to teach your child how to read. You should hold me accountable to that. I promise you your child should be able to compute at a level that puts her on track to college or a great career. You should hold me to that. The question of parent advocacy, though, Sharifa, is a question of how people hold me accountable. And that's a loaded question in some ways, right? Like you really need a third party that says, all right, Marcus said that. Now this is what we're going to do to hold Marcus accountable, to hold Sarah accountable, to hold Tony accountable, to hold all these people who are responsible for the delivery of these services accountable. And so there are great voices throughout this region, whether it's a group like Bridge to Hope or We Power or SEAM or any number of groups, I think, who could come into the space and be a partner for our parents in terms of talking about how they push us to walk our talk. So I'm not trying to dodge this notion of parent training. I do think to the extent that we have expectations, we ought to orient parents to the expectations. To the extent that parents are struggling with that, we ought to go to the house and say, hey, we see that you're struggling with this. This is why we came by, to help you understand this is what's going on. So outreach should definitely be part of what we're doing. But I feel like there's a line of demarcation where when we start talking about advocacy, then it needs to be a neutral third party that the parents can say, the information that you're giving me, I can trust because you're not trying to police yourself.
Very quickly, and because you've mentioned this before in other meetings, and I think it's important to talk about it here. So very quickly, we have like 3 minutes. Can you talk about your vision for the high school?
Sure. I feel like we've done a great job of demonstrating a commitment to updated spaces for our elementals, with the exception of Belnor, where we honestly need to just do better. When it comes to our high school and the kind of graduate aims that we're setting forth, the space is just incongruent with high expectations. I was there today, and even as somebody who you could argue likes school, I didn't like school today. I was ready to go. And when I visit great school spaces, the thing that jumps out for me is these are places where kids want to be. And we need to make sure that our high school is that. So to that end, we have updating of the spaces to make sure that they're bright and attractive for and commensurate with our learning ends. We need to think about STEAM, coding, and other science and technology issues. We need to think about safety and security to make sure that we keep bad elements out of our buildings. We need to think about health and hygiene and how we socially distance within the space. And so to my mind, as I look around, we've got about $25 to $40 million of deferred maintenance on our high school campus. That's not even making it a Shangri-La. That's just to say that we're serious about learning at the high school level. So with that being said, today we did a walk to ensure that we're starting to establish a vision for that. We'll be bringing that to the board. We'll be talking about that with the community. But the high school is the cultural and spiritual center of our school community. It is the place aspirationally that our third graders should want to get to, that our parents take great pride in. And we're going to deliver, I think, a great facility that this region can be proud of.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robinson, and also to all of our attendees. We're at that 5-minute mark. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Robinson to wrap it up. Just before he does, this meeting is being recorded and we will post it on our website. So if you weren't able to attend, or if you want to go back and look at it again, feel free to do so. It'll be on the superintendent's page. And we'll also post the questions that were asked. There were some questions that we did not get to. They were more logistical questions, and so we'll answer those, and we'll post the answers for those as well. So I'll turn it back over to Mr. Robinson to close.
Yeah, I think I will close out by just saying that the weight of the times are upon us. That we had a deep and abiding issue before there was a pandemic. Before the lives of the families we serve were complicated, not just by death and disease, but by stinging, deep and abiding poverty and unemployment. So the days before us are going to be really tough. But I believe every place that I've gone and everyone I've talked to has leaned in on ambition. Nobody has shrunk from it. Nobody's tried to make excuses about why it can't get done. Nobody has tried to backpedal or lower expectations. We're talking about transforming not just how people work, but how people see themselves. And that comes, I think, with a great deal of encouragement. We're going to need every person who's participating in this virtual town hall to throw in, to put on the shirt, to wave the banner, to join us in this movement of transformation and understand that it's bigger than us. We're not just talking about the soul of Normandy. If we're able to transform this district, and we will still have Jennings on our back door, and as cousins need to do inspirational work such that the lives of the kids of Jennings are improved, the lives of the kids in Ferguson are improved. But when we do this work, we create a sense of hope and possibility, not just for our community, but for the broader region. This is really important stuff. And it will not be easy because our kids didn't get behind overnight, they're not gonna catch up overnight. And the way in which they catch up will cause them to have to live differently. It'll cause our parents to have to interact differently. It'll cause our teachers to have to serve differently, our principals to have to lead differently. And we'll just need you along that way, because all of those folks are going to get tired. And they're going to need every participant in this virtual town hall to say, we see you and please keep it up. And when it comes to the kind of resources that are tough to talk about, they're going to need people who are ready to say, this is a really ugly conversation and this hurts deeply, but we have a moral imperative to say as a community, we love each and every child, and we're going to make sure that they have a safe and inviting space to go to school, that they have the very best teachers in front of them, and that they have the richest and most rigorous content. And so I'm excited to be in partnership with you to the extent that we can get together in person. I absolutely want to do that. Please reach out. Let us connect. I owe you a donut at least. And let's talk about the future of Normandy. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I look forward to connecting with you in person when we can. Be great, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.